Good evening and welcome to the EPA Alumni Association's webinar on interviewing skills. And as Ro was just mentioning, on Monday night, we had a great presentation on how to write a resume. The resume will open the door, but once you walk through that door, you need the interviewing skills. And that's what we're going to hear about tonight. This evening, we are fortunate to have Roseann Deal here to give us expert advice on how to prepare a resume, rather to conduct an interview. Roseann is one of us. She is a recent EPA retiree who devoted most of her career to helping employees reach their full potential, and she's doing it tonight. Roseann is sharing a presentation she created for EPA Region 3 with a few updates to help you get ready for interviews, no matter what organization you're applying to. You will undoubtedly have some questions as she makes her presentation. Please put those in the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of her presentation. Her slides will also be posted on the Alumni Association's webpage. And in addition, Ro is being incredibly generous with her time. She's providing a contact information, so if you want to reach out to her after tonight's presentation, you can do so. Please join me in welcoming Roseann Deal.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate it. Before I get started and before I forget, I also want to thank Beth, Craig very, very much for this opportunity and all the wonderful folks that are helping out tonight, Allison and Lori and Gary, and also Chuck Elkins, the Executive Director of the EPA Alumni Association. Just a plug for the Alumni Association. I didn't know so much about it when I retired, and I was a coach for EPA Region 3. There is a coaching cadre. By the way, if you're still employed, I would highly recommend that you sign up to get a coach. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't matter how many years of service you have. It doesn't matter what role you have in the organization. It's open to everybody. And this could be a nice extra thing to do after the resume writing and the interviewing skills workshop tonight. So please think about doing that. But I offered to stay on as a coach. And in order to do that, I needed to apply to the Alumni Association. So that's how I became aware of it. And it's really been wonderful. I mean, they are really working very hard to help EPA employees at any stage of their careers. So again, thanks to the Alumni Association, everybody here tonight. And thanks and congratulations to all of you. We're up to like 20 attendees now. I was thinking as I was watching the names appear that I could see where the resume writing workshop might have a lot of appeal right now, and that the interviewing skills workshop may not have so much appeal, thinking, well, that's in the distance. I'll worry about my resume first, and then maybe I'll get around to practicing interviewing questions. But you'll see in this presentation that they're all pretty well connected. And it's really good to get a head start and to start working on it. So I was going to, I being a panelist or a co-host or whatever I am tonight, in addition to a presenter, I don't have access to the Q&A to write anything in it. So we're going to start tonight, if we can start the slideshow. Allison is helping me tonight with this, which I really, really appreciate. And she'll be advancing the slides for us. But we're going to start with an activity. And I hope that you'll play along and say, yeah, I think I really would like to do this. If you don't want to, that's fine. I have no way of knowing whether you've done it or not. So if Allison would advance to our first slide, I will give you this step number 1. There's 7 steps. There's 7 steps, and then there's 7 habits, with apologies to Stephen Covey. But there's 7 steps. And the first one is to think about, when did you feel great about you? So there's an exercise. If you're sitting down, please stand up. It might not be a bad idea anyway to stretch, take a few deep breaths, get ready for this session. this is your time. This is your investment. So you want to make sure that if you're at home, the door is closed, you have privacy, you're able to really focus in on you and devote the time to yourself. So I'm asking everybody to stand up straight, shoulders back, or a comfortable, good posture stance, hands on the hips. Take a few deep breaths. We'll take a deep breath in and then out. And you can see that when you're breathing, you kind of naturally smile, or at least I do. So if there's a big smile on your face, this is actually what they call a power pose. And, who does this remind us of? Standing like this. It seems that we have so many superheroes today. Back in the day, we had Superman, Wonder Woman, and then all of the bad people that were against these characters. But today we seem to have so many superheroes. There's like capes galore. And so this is to kind of get you in that groove of, yeah, I'm self-confident, I'm successful, I'm prepared, I'm ready to go. So I want you to think about a time in your life where all those things were really true and they were really happening, where you were very self-confident, you were successful, you were prepared, you were at the right place at the right time for the right thing for the right reason. And, being in the flow, being in the groove, like a lot of competitive athletes feel, or sometimes performers get this feeling where you can't do anything wrong. You're just on top of the world. So think about, when was that? Was it at home? Was it at work? Was it in the community? Wherever it was, it doesn't matter. Write down the circumstances. What happened? What did you do? How did you do it? What was the result? If you were to do that, and you can actually do that while I'm talking, you can do that tonight. If you're thinking of something, at least write down what the circumstance was so that you can follow up later. But the idea is that once you get this together, you have actually written a success story. You've written a possible story that could be an interview answer. And then after you have written the story and you've rehearsed it and you've shared it with somebody, you're going to feel really good about yourself. You really will. It's going to increase endorphins. You're going to feel more self-confident. And with this one story, you can do a lot. And I will show you that right now. Thank you, Allison. Okay. So step 2 is to shift to a positive mindset. And sometimes that's more difficult to do than other times. And right now, it might be very challenging for you to do this. So if you had this story used as your fuel, so to speak, it's possible that when you are thinking about good things that have happened to you, you will shift. There will be a shift. Even if it's a temporary one, it's okay. It's still a shift. But these stories are so important to the interview process. And my take on preparing for an interview is, consider your interview as just a series of stories that you've prepared and you have rehearsed in advance. Sounds simple, sounds easy. It does take some work, though, to do this. So we're going to go through and explain to you how to do this. How would you be able to do it? So first couple tips are things that you've heard before. It's important to do your homework. It's important to research different organizations that you might be interested in applying to, or if you've already applied. This is what I was saying before, that the interviewing and the resume, they're very intertwined and they shouldn't be separated, because there's good work that you need to do when you put that resume together that's going to help you with your interview answers. You can kind of do it concurrently. So let's say that you applied for a job, you've already done your resume, and now you are, actually, I wouldn't even wait. I wouldn't wait until you get a call. If you're putting an application into an organization, I would start researching then. So talk to some folks, if you know any, who have this job or a similar job. Research the organization. get to know what's involved in the job if I should get it. What kind of a job is this? And Beth Craig recommended that you should always be looking to see if there's a former EPA colleague who might work there and you could connect with that person. Lots of times, LinkedIn gives you that information. The bottom line is you're the one who is responsible for being prepared to tell your stories as answers to the interviewer's questions. And very importantly, connecting your past to your future with those answers. We're going to be talking a lot about that. You're in control. You have to be ready for any question that's asked. But the reason I like this approach is part of the nerves that happen when we are looking to prepare for an interview is, what are they going to ask me? I'm so nervous. I wonder what they're going to ask me. If you prepare your answers in advance, that's it. So that it's not about the interviewers anymore. It's about the interviewee. It's about you. And you're the one who has control now of the interview. So just that knowledge alone going in would increase self-confidence and make you much more comfortable. Okay, let's keep going. But before we do, there's just a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Is this a typical interviewing tip session tonight? Honestly, it's not. This presentation was created several years ago. It was designed for EPA employees who had work. They were current employees. If they were thinking about an interview or applying for something, it wasn't because they had to do it. It was because they wanted to do it. It was because they wanted to be on a detail, or they wanted to transfer from region 3 to headquarters or to another region. Maybe they were looking to become a supervisor. So I realize in your case, in some of your cases, that you were not planning to redo your resume at this time. You were not planning to create interview answers. And as I said, it's hard enough doing it when you are actively seeking to do it, but when it's sort of thrust upon you, it's very challenging. And we know this. We understand that you may be feeling overwhelmed right now. You may be feeling confused, fearful. You might be angry. You might even be grieving the loss of what you thought your career would be. And, these are very serious times. One of the big reasons we're doing this tonight. So I'm hoping that tonight you'll feel encouraged. Tonight you'll come to believe that you already have what you need to succeed in something else. And you know why? Because you're a federal employee, and federal employees have a lot of things they have to go through before they become a federal employee. HR folks will tell you, we look for people who are a good fit for federal service. That's a very high bar. So you've already passed that. And many of you have had a very long career. You know about ethics. You've been trained in it just about every single year if you're a Form 450 filer. You know your role models. You've already established yourselves as highly skilled professionals. So if I was looking to hire somebody, I would absolutely, knowing what I know about federal employees, they would be at the top of my list. So I just want you to be encouraged that it might not be a job that you're used to. It might not be within the federal sector, but you have lots of transferable skills, many, many transferable skills. And I just want you to be encouraged with that. Okay. All right. Well, those of you who were with us on Monday night, and a lot of you were, which is so nice to know, you remember that Mary Beck started and she spoke for about half the time, and then she switched to Dave. And then he taught us all about AI. And I have to be honest with you, I had never tried anything with AI before. And I'm sitting there listening to this workshop and wondering, oh my, I wonder if the participants are feeling a little bit overwhelmed because maybe they haven't done anything with AI either. Uh, we were not encouraged in Region 3 to use it. We might not even been permitted to use it from what I can recall. So what I decided to do was I didn't go as far as Dave did, but what I found was that on PowerPoint, there's something called Copilot. And I don't know if any of you know about Copilot, or I don't have the participant thing on anymore. I think I won't be able to see anything that's happening behind the scenes, but that's okay. So if you know what I'm talking about, within PowerPoint, there's something called Copilot, and I've noticed it before, but I never really tried it. So I gave it a shot and I asked it two questions. I asked it, how can I really prepare for an interview? And I asked it, what kinds of questions do you think I might be asked in the interview? So these two slides, this one and the next one, I did not write. I had nothing to do with these slides, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to get this assistance. And it was pretty good assistance. So the do your homework slide has to do with things I've pretty much have already said. Research the company. You have to practice your interview questions. Dressing appropriately. This happens sometimes when I'm working with clients. They want to know, what should I wear? So professional attire, something that matches the company culture. And of course, you want to make a very good first impression. And the thank you note, the old school, old fashioned thank you note showed up on this short list of things to do when you are an interviewee. So to send a thank you note after the interview, and it could be handwritten, it could be an email. Personally, I go with the handwritten. I think that's a nice touch, and very few people do that. So it shows that you're appreciative, and it also, oh boy, they sent me you know how it is today when you're like, you get the mail and the mail seems to be, by the way, the older you get, the mail has a lot to do with health insurance and things like that. But I always like perk up. As a matter of fact, I got a thank you note today in the mail. And it was really old fashioned and old school. But for those of you who like that kind of thing, don't hesitate to send a thank you note. Okay, I'm going to show you the next slide, which is also AI inspired. And this is, what are the kinds of questions that they might ask me? So they're going to ask you about your past experiences. They're going to ask you about your skills and strengths. They're going to ask you about situations that you found yourself in. Now, here's where the stories really kick in. And I highlighted the word scenarios because that's actually what you're going to be creating from the wealth of information that you have in your resume. We'll be talking about that in a moment. And then again, to prepare common questions in advance. I imagine that's what they mean here, to demonstrate that you're suitable for the job and for the role that you are seeking. So that's my ode to AI. And please give Copilot a try, or any of the other AI platforms that are out there. And my next slide has a lot to do again with what happened on Monday night. So this slide is inspired by Mary Beck and Dave. Now, I might make you laugh a little bit here. And I really would like to see hands raised, but I don't think I can see them, but that's okay. Some of you may remember that traditional federal resume. I have 32 years of service, actually over 32. And I just said I won't tell if you won't, but I just told you. So I have 32 years of service. And there was that SF 171. And that thing, I mean, people had like 20 and 30 pages. So some of you might still have that. And then some of you might also have an IDP that you've created, which is your individual development plan. Some of you may have a CV. And by the way, I looked up the correct pronunciation of curriculum is vitae if you're American, and it's vitae if you're British. Let's just call it a CV. But somebody on Monday night asked about the CV. So vita, which is the Latin here, is life. So vitae or vitae, or however you want to pronounce it, means multiple, like a plural for life. So this is your life story, that CV. And some of you might have one if you are scientists and you regularly publish, if you've written books, if you've created something, this CV has all that. The resume is more of a condensed version of the CV. And according to Mary Beck, it should be 1 to 2 pages. Okay. So no matter how many years of service you have, you probably have some document that lists your accomplishments and your goals. Well, it's time to dust it off and scour for stories, because this is where the stories lie. Okay, we're going to keep going. Step number 3. I wonder what they're going to ask me. Well, here is a relatively ambitious list, I think, of different themes of interviewing questions. The first one is the most important one. The first one is also the one that most people do not prepare. I don't know why. I'm guilty of this myself. I lost out on a job decades ago because I didn't have a good answer to this question. And that's why I put this one first. Why do you want this job? Why should we select you? So if you're getting your stories together, I recommend starting with this story and looking at that first story that I encouraged you to write. I would also encourage you to think about your values. Maybe some of you have done self-assessments in your career, or you've done a 360 where you've gotten feedback. Maybe some of you have taken StrengthsFinder or some other strengths assessment. This is a good time to collect all that data, gather it all in one place. I know some of my clients have binders and they're able to which I really think is wonderful. They can just pick this stuff up at a moment's notice and be able to take a look. But this is the time for self-evaluation too, because again, your resume tweaking and your job seeking and your being interested in whether or not you're ready for an interview, you weren't preparing to do these things. And now you're quickly trying to get them done. It's going to take a little bit of soul searching, I think, and some self-assessment to make sure that you're on the right track, that you are pursuing something else that's going to also bring you a lot of pleasure and fulfillment, whether it's in the federal sector, whether it's local or state government, whether it's the private sector, nonprofits. There are lots of different opportunities out there for people with your skills. So going back to the list, these are just some suggestions, some stories that you can create. And you would be doing them in advance, writing them down. Yes, it's going to take you time, but it's really going to be worth it. Okay, let's keep going. So that was step 3. And now step 4 is, how do I actually write this story? Okay, well, here's a suggestion, a model that you can follow. Funny story about this model, which I call the SARC model. When I shared this with other training officers at EPA, I got a phone call from someone and they're like, I have been searching on the internet for the SARC model and I don't see it anywhere. And I said, well, that's because I made this up. It's not on the SARC model. And I don't own it or anything because I did it as a federal employee. And I do have this little copyright thing, but it's not copyrighted. Anyway, here's what makes this a little bit different from other models that you might have used. You're always going to start with the situation, the set the stage, the scenario, the S. And it's basically the who, what, where, when, why. It's those kinds of things, like who was involved and what was the issue and where did this happen? When did it happen? Why did this happen? So once you have all that straightened out, then you go into the action. Well, how did you do this? And it is about you. How did you resolve the problem? How did you impress? How did you achieve? How did you collaborate? How did you lead? And then what did you do? I'm going to be sharing some feedback that I've gotten from interviewers through the years as I did this workshop a lot. I also work one-on-one with clients to help them get ready for interviews. So one of the things I learned was that depending upon where you are in your career, but this can happen anywhere. It could happen to a newer employee, it could happen to a more seasoned employee. The tendency to use the word we, if you're part of a team, we did this, we did that. And it's good to not take credit for something that you didn't do, but it's also important to make sure that the interviewer understands what it is that you did and to give yourself credit, to toot your own horn, to pat yourself on the back for that. So after you do the situation and after you do the action, then it's the result. What was the outcome? What happened? Now, you might recall Mary Beck on Monday night explaining that you need to be as specific as possible here. You need to use numbers and hard data, numbers, percentages, cost savings, especially if you're going to be venturing out of government and into more profit oriented kind of business. You want the result to be as specific and as compelling and interesting as possible. Now, that's where some answers stop. They set it up, tell me what you did, and then you tell the result. I'm going to encourage you to think of one more step that I think is very important, and that is connecting your past to your future. How does what you did in this particular situation, how does it connect to this new job that you want? And this is where you're going to be talking about your transferable skills. Now, one could ask, wouldn't the interviewers be able to put two and two together? Not all the time. Sometimes you really have to spell it out. You really have to tell them. And so that's why this is the SARC model. It's SARC. Don't forget about the connections. And remember, also, if you have any volunteer experience or community experience, they could be part of your success stories too. Okay, Allison. All right. Well, boy, this next slide. Once upon a time starts so many good stories, and these good stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every interview answer should also have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you might say, all right, this sounds common sense. Why is she making a big deal about this? I can tell you that when working with clients and helping them rehearse their answers, oftentimes there is no beginning. And sometimes there is no end because it goes on and on and on and on. And the middle can be a little fuzzy. So these are things that you really want to focus in on. I like to encourage people to have a great beginning. And here's a way to think about it. When you're asked the question, you may ask to have the question repeated if you need to do that. I wouldn't do it on every question, but if you feel you need a little bit more time, if you feel like you need a little bit more clarity, you can ask the question, ask them to repeat the question. You can also take a beat. You do not have to start talking right away. Take your time, take a beat. And when you've written your story, now you see your mind is also saying, okay, what story am I going to use? And you've come up with your story. I always recommend that the first line of the story be memorized, that you memorize that first line, and that you also have a good solid ending that you might also memorize, but do not memorize the rest of it. This is not about memorizing anything other than the beginning and the end. It's not about reading a script. It's not about that. It's about rehearsing to the point where you're so comfortable with the answer. It's going to be different every time. I rehearsed this workshop a few times today. Every single time it was different because I don't work off of notes, which is good or not good, depending upon the presenter. I don't have any notes. So every time I do it, it's just a little bit different. And that's the way your answers are going to be too. You don't want to look like you've rehearsed and you've over prepared. Okay. So, oh, no, let's go back again, Allison. Thank you. Again, you want to connect your answer to the new job. And you want to make sure that your answers are clear, concise, and confident. I like those 3 C's. I didn't write it down that way, but it came to me today when I was rehearsing. The 3 C's: clear, concise, confident, well paced, and like Goldilocks, it's not too long, it's not too short, but it's just right. And what does that mean? Is it 3 minutes? Is it 4 minutes and 20 seconds? It's difficult to put a timing to it, and I wouldn't necessarily been out of shape about that. I think that some answers that are long can be very engaging and compelling if they're presented in that way. And you don't need to cut yourself short if you are a very engaging speaker and you can captivate people for that length of time. If it's not your forte, you might not want to have answers to be too long. But usually it takes a good 3 minutes, I would think, to answer a question thoroughly. And if you're concise, it won't take as long. If you start out strong, you're not doing a lot of vocalized pauses like and ah, and hopefully not overly nervous. Somewhere around 3 to 4 minutes is usually a good thing. Okay, Allison. So when you are speaking, you have to be careful too about what people are seeing that you might not be aware of. And that has a lot to do with body language, facial expression, and sometimes too it could be what you're wearing, it could be your background. And a lot of interviews are online, they're virtual, and it's important to have a background that's not distracting. It's important to have jewelry that's not distracting. It's important to be comfortable in what you're wearing so you're not tugging at things and things fit you properly. I've helped people who keep adjusting their glasses, but they don't know they're doing it, or they're twisting their hair, or they're moving their earring, or they're doing something. In my case, I'm using my hands too much. I can tell that right now. So there are things that we might do, and we're just not aware of them because they haven't been brought to our attention. That's why it's really important to rehearse with a trusted friend or colleague, or a coach, or a member of your family, or in front of the mirror. I also recommend that you could go on Zoom, you could go on Teams, get into a room, put your camera on, and see yourself reflected back to you. You can also record and play something back so that you can hear yourself speak and watch what you're doing. So those would be my recommendations for the unseen stuff that could trip us up. Okay, let's see what the next slide will bring. Yeah, so practicing is important. It does take time. You want to observe, give feedback, incorporate the feedback that you receive. That's important. And then practice and then repeat. So when I work with clients, I tend to use a timer on my phone, and I ask the questions. And then what I do is, not only am I timing how long they're speaking completely, I'm also timing how long it took them to get to, like, the first point, for example. And it's amazing because you open your mouth and you start talking and you think you're really answering the question when actually it took you 1 minute and 20 seconds to get to the answer, because you gave a lot of other information that you thought was really, really important, but it really didn't address the question. So these are the things that an honest observer will share with you, which will be very important for you to know. Okay, Allison. Step 7. Step 7. Okay, so being ready, being calm. I had somebody, you know what? I just remembered I did this presentation for somebody in another region. And he said to me, I'm not good when I'm really calm. I'm better like revved up, you know? And so I'm saying to keep calm, but maybe that won't work for you. I don't know. We have to be open minded about it. And speaking of mind, Mindfulness techniques could help calm the nerves a little bit, whatever that might be for you. Maybe you're incorporating them already in your life, like yoga, taking a walk, journaling, listening to music, meditating, any of those kinds of things that would bring you into the present. You always want to be in the present. You don't want to be fretting about the past or a past interview or your current employment status or anything like that. And you don't want to jump too far into the future. You want to stay present and focused, clear, concise, and confident, engaged, interested in whatever this is that's coming up for you. And just being in the present, I think, is very, very important. So how do you kind of calm down? Breathing. I love breathing exercises. I think they're really great. I did try that a little bit at the beginning here. If you find that you are getting jittery or your heart might be racing, you're feeling very nervous, just to take a couple of very good deep breaths, hold the breath. Like you breathe in, I believe it's breathing in for 5, holding for 2, and releasing for 7. And if I'm wrong about that, please put it in the chat if anybody has the correct, but I think that's what it is. And it's been proven and researched and everything. There's data to show that this is the best way to breathe, to calm down. Now, what do you do the night before? All right. Within your control, and I know sometimes things happen, we have families, we have responsibilities, but to the best of your ability, the night before, you should get to bed early, as early as you can. Make sure that you get a good night's sleep. Sometimes when we're nervous and we have something important coming up the next day, we don't sleep as well. And we could wake up a couple of times. We could be restless. So to kind of give you a level playing field, try to get to bed a little bit earlier. Old school advice, have out in front of you everything that you're going to be needing for the next day. So you would have your clothes already selected. They'd be ready to go. I know this sounds like, why is she telling us all these things? But I'm telling you that it just makes it so much easier. And it might not be something that everybody thinks about. So the night before, you just want to focus in, you practice a little bit. You can still be rehearsing. The day of. Now, the day of is very important. And we all have our times during the day where we're more energetic than other times. And we can try our best to be alert and really on fire all day long. But for most of us, that doesn't really happen. We usually don't have control over when the interview is scheduled either. So if it's after lunch, that could be, trying for a couple different reasons. You want to make sure that you eat lunch. When I told you earlier that I lost out on a job because I couldn't answer the question about why I was the right person, I did not eat lunch. And I had this, and usually I'm okay when I don't eat, but for some reason it really reacted very negatively for me. I began to lose energy during the interview. And the last question was, why should we select you? And I was like, I don't even know where I was at that point. I was just so out of it. And so I will never do that again. Always eat something. Make sure you have a little bit of protein. If it's in the morning, you want to make sure you have breakfast. Try not to schedule another appointment really close to the interview, because ideally, I'd love to see it where a half hour before you start taking the nice deep breaths, and you also rehearse one of your answers. Usually it's the one about why you want the job, or it's that success story that you wrote earlier, where you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing for the right reasons. Everybody's happy about you, applauding you. You're thinking about all the wonderful things people have said about you. Anything that you could do to pump yourself up. Maybe it's spending time with your pet or your child or your significant other. Whatever you need to do to get yourself revved up and ready, because when you meet for the first time and you get asked that first question, you're on. There really isn't like a warm-up period here. You really have to be ready to go. Okay, Allison. As I said earlier, I have the 7 Habits of Highly Successful Interviewees, with apologies to Stephen Covey. And a lot of these you already know, but it doesn't hurt to remind that regardless of your relationship to the interviewer or the organization, this was more of an issue when you did internal interviewing, but it also could be an issue with a new organization, and I'll explain why. Hopefully, you've done your homework about this organization to such an extent that maybe you've already had an informational interview. Maybe you've already had a coffee chat with somebody in that organization. And this is another reason why I'm saying that when you do your resume and you start sending out your resume, job applications, whatever they might be, concurrently, you need to be networking. You need to be finding somebody in that organization that you can sit down and chat with to find out more about it. And these are like mini interviews. Informational interviews tend to be where you go and you meet with someone for 30 minutes. You ask them maybe up to 5 questions. But technically speaking, they're looking at you as a potential hire, probably. They're looking at you, with other ideas. So you're kind of being interviewed while you're doing the informational interview. Keep that in mind. Don't assume that the interviewer knows you, your work, or your accomplishments. Again, more of an issue internally, but because you've had a coffee chat, because you've had an informational interview, they might already know you a little bit, and you just don't want to leave anything to chance. I know that, again, interviewers have told me that they were frustrated by a couple of very good candidates because they knew there was more that they could have said, because they were aware of what they had done, but they didn't mention it. And then the interviewee would tell me, oh, well, they already know about that about me. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. No, you have got to pretend you're a blank slate, that nobody knows you, and you have to tell everything. Well, there's some editing involved there. You don't want your answers to be too long, but you know what I mean. You're deciding the talking points. It's like, when you're doing a briefing, for a manager, and you have certain things that you definitely need to say. It is the same kind of thing where you've got these talking points. So, you have the story and you have your opening sentence, and then you've got like 3 bullet points that you really want to cover. And you can go through those bullet points. And then at the end, you can kind of review what you've said, and then also do that connecting to the new job. So decide those talking points and make sure that you don't leave the interview until you've told everything that you want to tell, including at the end when they ask you, do you have any questions for us? The answer always needs to be yes. You should have a journal with you, a nice looking notebook, and a nice looking pen, and be professional as possible, and already have your questions in your notebook. If anything comes along while you're in the interview and you think of a question, you can jot it down. If you realize that you've answered questions, but I wish I had said this, I left it out, you can say it at the end, or you can add it to another question, that's another answer to a question that's coming up. So don't leave with anything unsaid. All right, let's go to habit number 4. Do whatever you need to exude confidence. Whatever it takes. Some people are just more naturally self-confident than others. If this is an area that you need to work on, please try to work on it by doing, usually physical activity helps, going over your list of accomplishments, getting feedback from other people. Even if you need to take a presentation skills course or a public speaking course, that would also help. If you think you can wing it, you're not right about that. You've got to put the time in. You're worth the effort. And I do know people who have told me, I don't really care that much about it. I'm just going to wing it. It's just not a good idea. Try to be as rehearsed as you possibly can be. You're investing now in your future. You're investing in your life. You've got to do your homework. You've got to write and practice these stories so that you'll be fully prepared for the interview. And the seventh habit, if we don't know what it is already, da, 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 it's to rehearse and to practice. Listen, seek feedback, incorporate the feedback, repeat. Do it in front of a mirror, do it, record it in Teams, whatever you need to do, whatever works best. And I think we've come to the end of our presentation today. This is a sunrise, which I selected for this particular photo. I'd like to keep this on as we're taking questions. I think it's inspiring. I think it's beautiful. I think this is a time where it's important to surround yourself with beauty, to surround yourself with nature, to be as positive as you can possibly be, and as future focused as you can possibly be, while you're still not forgetting who you are, what you've done, the impact you've made. You can do this somewhere else. It's really going to be possible for you to do it somewhere else. While I believe it could be, I thought it might be Gary or maybe Lori who's going to look in the Q&A for me. But I just want to, since I couldn't write in the Q&A, I do want to let you know that I would be happy to help anybody here I know people, by the way, welcome to everybody who's looking at this as a recording. We welcome you to it that way too. But if you're here live, or if you're here at the recording, if you need help and you'd like to reach out to me, we're going to find a way to put my information somewhere, probably on the EPA Alumni Association site. So again, my thanks to everybody at the EPA Alumni Association. My sincere thanks and good wishes to all of you who are here tonight and who are looking at this on the recording. We believe in you. Mary Beck did a nice job yesterday on Monday night of explaining that as well. We really do care. And anything else that we can help you with, we are very, very eager to help you. So on that note, whoever might be looking at the Q&A, and if there's any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to do that now.
Great. Thank you, Ro. That was a great presentation, and I did hear it before, but I seem to learn something new every time I hear it. So we all appreciate your making the presentation. There are just a few questions. So you've apparently done a great job of answering most people's concerns. First one is, how recent does the example have to be, or the examples that you cite have to be?
For the interviewing answers.
Yes.
I recall Dave and Mary Beck talking about this with respect to the resume. And they said that the resume should be about 10 to 15 years back. So I think that might be a good way to look at this. However, if it's a story about, these stories can be personal as well, especially if you've overcome a great obstacle in your personal life. You might have overcome something as a child, which has, shaped you and informed the rest of your life that you want to share with the interviewing team. So I wouldn't discount anything that is perceived to be too far back if it's really important, impactful, it's going to be engaging, it's going to help the interviewers better know who you are. I hope that helps.
That was a great answer. Second question is, how might we politely respond to the question, why do you want to leave your current job? I know it is important not to badmouth and best to focus on growth, goals, and next steps. However, with many of us forced into searching for new work, this is tricky. Any recommendations on phrasing?
I'll tell you, if there was ever a time where an employer would understand why you're looking for a job, this is it. I don't know if you're going to get that question, frankly. If they see your resume and they see where you hail from, and perhaps even the kind of work that you were doing at EPA, they might have already figured it out. I'd love anybody else to weigh in on this, but if it were me, I would say something along the lines that it wasn't my intention necessarily to be looking for a job right now. But I am looking forward to a change. I'm looking forward to an opportunity. And I hope that you would, consider all the great things that I did on the job that I can bring to this job. Always keeping it positive and connected to what it was that you did, the transferable skills. But given the circumstances, I would doubt that anybody would be. I mean, is it okay to say? I wouldn't put it down like, well, you know what? I really don't want to be doing this. I don't. You don't want to do that at all. It's just like I've been given an opportunity to look for a new job, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability, and I really would love to work here. There's an answer. Beth, did you have
So,
something?
yes, I did. I actually went through a RIF many years ago. And, why do you want to leave your job? The answer was, actually, I have a wonderful job, but it looks like I'm not going to be having it much longer. It's almost and it was very public that the organization was going through a RIF. So I had very little service. Once the RIF actually happened, I was not going to be able, and I just decided, the more people who did not have service and got out and left, it would be easier for everybody else. But it was also, I then could decide where I wanted to interview in the future. And that's how I ended up at EPA. So, for some portions of the agency, the work is being eliminated. It's not that when someone says, why do you want to leave your current job? I think the answer is, almost that's the way it works. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're going to have very empathetic interviewing folks. Remember, if you've made it to an interview, they've already looked at a lot about you. They might have even have checked references and everything else. So they understand, why you're now looking for a job. And lucky for them that you are looking for one, because, hopefully they would have a good fit for you.
Okay. Next question. I'm sure this person is expressing the gratitude that all of us feel. Thank you all for sharing your experience and expertise. It's greatly appreciated. For those of us currently on administrative leave, I have a question regarding interviews. When responding to certain interview questions, how much should we guard internal EPA information? For example, when answering questions like, number one, describe a difficult decision you made under pressure. What happened? Number two, tell me about a time when you missed a deadline and the outcome. Number three, would you like me to just do these and one at a time and have you respond, or you want me to go through his list of 4 questions?
I'd like to hear the other questions because I think they're all in the same vein. So you
Okay.
can just tell me all of them.
The third one is, what is an achievement you are most proud of? And number 4, what was the hardest problem you've worked on? And then they say, during practice, some of the details that come to mind might involve internal processes not publicly available. How can we best respond to these types of questions without disclosing potentially sensitive trade secrets? Thank you for your guidance.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you do have to be careful about that for sure. And I don't think it matters whether you are on. First of all, if you're on admin leave, I know someone who is, and it is not an easy situation by any means. I hope you're doing well, and I hope that you are staying strong. And congratulations for coming here tonight. So in any interview, regardless of your employment status, you do have to be careful about revealing names and specifics. I would think that, again, with the interviewing questions being like the answers being about 3 to 4 minutes, you really should be focusing in on what you did. You don't probably have to set the stage so much that you have to spell out every little thing about what the problem was. It could be very general, but when you start talking about what it is that you did, then you can become, more specific without giving away. They might not even know the nature of the problem, really. You could probably, you don't have to tell them everything. Anybody else have any comments on that one? Anyone been in this situation?
So you may want to try to go back a little bit in time in terms of being able to answer some of those questions.
That's a good idea too.
And then you may feel more comfortable, and you may even say at a certain point, I'm going to reach back to a prior job to answer this particular question or something like that. So you feel like you have set some boundaries on what you feel you can talk about during that particular question or during the interview. I'm just, talking
That's
about.
a good idea, Beth. Yes. Yeah, I like that. I hope that helped the person who answered. That was good. These questions are great.
Another question. Can we talk about our current position if we are being riffed?
Yes. Why can't you?
Absolutely.
You have a job. Your job is being eliminated. Yes, you can.
Absolutely.
The next question. Any thoughts on how to handle an intimidating interviewer?
Ooh. Well, you know what? That brings up another thing that I didn't talk about, and that is at EPA. Now, it wasn't always this way. We have these 3-person panels, and we didn't always. I mean, I remember being interviewed by just one person a few different times. So we have the panels now, but that might not be the case in other sectors. Even if it's other forms of government, state or local, we don't know. So I would encourage you to be prepared that you could have 3 people in front of you, you could have 2 people, you could have 1 person. Now, if the person's intimidating, this makes me think that perhaps the person has already encountered this kind of experience. I don't know if I'm right about this, but it sounds like you are remembering something that might have happened before and you're concerned that it's going to happen again. I know I can't really ask you to respond, but I think that if you are, again, confident, concise, clear, you have command, that's another C. You've got command of the situation. I would hope too that that wouldn't happen. And I would hope that the other panelists would be able to smooth that out. But yeah, I mean, I think we've all been in situations where we're before somebody, whether it's an interview, whether we're trying to get help from somebody, we're trying to get approval for something. I was in front of a zoning board recently, and there was someone like that. And I remained respectful because I really was trying to, get something, and you're trying to get something too in this case, to sort of, sometimes we just need to kind of overlook things. Now, if this person is going to be your supervisor in the new job, that might give you pause. But if it's somebody that you're just going to meet just this one time and they want to throw their weight around, try not to be intimidated. Just go and do your job, which is to tell your story, to show what you can do, to toot your own horn. That's why you're there. You're not there to be intimidated by other people.
Okay, and that set us up for the next question. Any recommendations for nervous blanking out? I had an interview recently where I was so nervous, I just blanked out and stumbled to answer the question.
I know. That happens. That happens to people, who are on stage. That happens to everybody. I mean, that's a very human thing to have happen. Well, I will I feel I must, at least say, when you are well rehearsed and you're prepared and you're in command of the situation, something like that would not be as likely to happen. So that's something that you might want to try the next time. But I always find too that humor tends to work well in just about every situation. And I think it's okay. I mean, if it's really a blank out and the panelists know it, you know, you can just, what comes to my mind is probably a little old fashioned, but I just thought of, like, I guess I didn't have my Wheaties today, or you can laugh it off a little bit. They should give you another opportunity to answer the question though. So with just calming down a bit and maybe going to another question and going back to that question again, you might be able to ask, if I could just, settle a little bit, I would like to answer that question. If you would give me a moment, I would answer it, or we could move on to the next one and maybe I could come back to that question. I think that is perfectly fine to do in an interview. It shows that you're vulnerable, you're human, and these things happen.
Yeah, I remember we were attending a Broadway play, and person sang a few lines, and then she just shorted out. She started over again, and everything was fine. So you're right; it can happen to anyone. The last
Yes.
question is, oh, actually, there's another one beside this. Thank you so much for a supportive, energizing session. It made me feel better about needing to look again. And
Yes. Thank you.
the last one is, what are some great follow-up questions you have received from someone you have interviewed?
Some great follow-up questions. Well, doing your homework about the organization. Oh, I'm sorry. These are follow-up questions.
Yes, what are some great follow-up questions you have received from someone you have interviewed?
So it's basically the interviewee is asking you a question.
Correct.
Right, right. But my point was, if it's a follow-up question, it would be something that has to do with the interview, some question that was answered. It's
Right.
something that came to mind. And so, or it could be like a prepared question that you already had written down in advance. So it was the follow-up that kind of threw me off a little bit. But some kind of a follow-up question could very well be, when you asked me about such and such, I'm curious to know, what else would there be about that? Or, could you tell me a little bit more about that? That would be like a follow up to whatever it is that the interviewer asked you. And you can always ask questions about the company. There, things you would not ask would be, how much does this job pay? Or, when do you think I'd be starting? A lot of people go into that one. Or what is it? One of the ones that are used a lot would be, what does a day on the job look like? What could I expect? Um, I have this particular skill. Do you think it would be something that would be used here? Things along those lines.
Okay. And that's it on questions.
Okay. All right. If there is nothing else, I guess I'm going to turn it back to Gary. Are you closing out? Is Beth closing out, or?
I think, Beth, did you want to close?
Well, we do have another question. What type of questions should we ask when they ask if you have any questions?
I missed that one. Sorry. Thank you.
No, it just
Yeah.
came in. It just came in. So
Right. And I think I was trying to answer that one before it came in. So any other questions, like, about the organization? If you did your homework, then there would be questions. You can even ask about, how the organization started. What kinds of opportunities would be here for me to do X, Y, and Z. I think the questions about, the questions that you bring to the table have more to do with the homework that you've done, which is why it's important to do your research. I would always keep it as positive as possible about the organization, about the mission of the organization, about how you feel you connect to that mission, how you can use skills from EPA with this new job, that you're excited about the possibility of working there, all those kinds of things, just to keep engaged and to keep positive. Everyone likes to see somebody who's really interested, I mean, we all like to know that people are listening to us when we're talking. And we want to know that when somebody comes in for a job, that they actually did a little bit of homework and they know what it is that we do. Did we get another question in while I was talking?
It's really not a question. It is a comment, and I think it's a great closing comment. This person says, just thanks for another great session. And I think we all agree with that. Thank you very much, Ro, for your time and your energy, your interest. People, I'm sure, really appreciate all the help that we can give them. And you've done a good job of that tonight.
Thank you, Gary.
So Gary and Ro, one of the things, Ro, I'd love for you to end on is making sure that when you're interviewing, especially at the end, that you get across to the person that you want the job. There have been people who have interviewed beautifully that I've interviewed in the past, and as they walked out the door, I'm not sure they want to work there. And maybe they thought they told me, but if you have one person, they both are equally good, but one says, gosh, I'd love to work in this organization, that's pretty compelling to the person who's the hiring official.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes if you don't get asked the question, why do you want to work here? Why should we select you? Why are you the best person for the job? The thank you note should also have that in there as well, that you are excited about the opportunity to possibly work there and that you really want to be there. Obviously, during the interview, you have to, it's this, I guess it's this fine line between being hungry, interested, engaged, and sometimes, maybe we lose a little bit of steam if we feel that somebody intimidated us, or this interview didn't seem to go as well as it did, or gee, I blanked out on that question. And maybe when all these things are going through your mind, you're not as likely to be as enthusiastic because you've already decided that maybe whatever I did or said didn't land properly. That's why I really think the most important thing is to remain present. If you do or say something in the interview and you think about it too much and you try to analyze it while you're trying to listen to the next question, it's just not going to serve you well. So you want to be as present as possible, do the best you can. If something doesn't land the way you think it should, do better in the next question. And as Beth said, yes, you cannot leave the room without letting them know, maybe more than once and in different ways, that you really want the job and you really want to work there, and that selecting you would be, you don't want to be too cocky, but selecting you would be a good decision because of X, Y, and Z, not just because you're a nice person, but all the different things that you bring to the table, which you would have already rehearsed and written down and gotten feedback on, and you would have practiced it. It's all in the rehearsal. It really, really is. And I know that that is a foreign concept for some people, unless they've learned an instrument, unless they have been a real competitive athlete or a professional performer. It's second nature. I mean, it's just like part of what folks do who have those kinds of jobs. But if you didn't have a job like that and you didn't have that in your life, it's a little bit, it might take some getting used to this whole idea of practicing and rehearsing. But to me, it's just such a guarantee that you're going to do so much better than all the other people, who are competing. This is a competition. All the other people who are competing for the job, you'll definitely have an edge. And again, we know that you can do it. You've done it before. You can do it again if you want to do it. And if you're in a position where you feel you have to do it, the Alumni Association is more than happy to continue to help you. I know there's all kinds of ways to reach out, probably on site or through emails and things like that on the website. So we hope that you stay in touch with us, and we do keep abreast of what's happening at the agency. We do know the different things that are going on there, and we do our best to bring you help based upon what it is that we are learning to be true. So, we're keeping tabs on things too.
Good.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, again, my thanks to everybody who's here tonight, and to Beth, to Chuck, to Lori, to Allison, and to Gary. Take good care. Keep in touch with us. And we hope to see you at another similar webinar sometime very soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.